over again.
Would you still become the face of breaking the taboo of infertility?
You know, it's so interesting because I really never wanted to be that face. And in fact, my background is sex and relationships, which is a heck of a lot sexier than infertility, in case you didn't know that. But yes, I would. It was not only something powerful, I think, to be a face early on the scene in this conversation, but it helped me in my own infertility journey to actually come out of the closet and show my face.
And how has infertility changed who you are?
It's changed everything about my life. I was diagnosed, what's interesting is I was diagnosed at 14 with probable infertility, probable endometriosis. Of course, if they don't open you, they can't know for sure. But when I got married, I told my husband it may take us a little bit to have kids because I was aware of my infertility, but I never thought it would be such a defining moment in my life. I just thought it was something that might take us like a little longer. And we got married kind of young, so I wasn't concerned. The way it changed me, it changed everything. It changed I was commitment phobic in the past. I wasn't someone born to be a mom. Like I didn't always know I wanted to have kids. It made me so clear that I wanted to have kids. It made me so grateful when I finally had my daughter so many years later. It created this career, my calling that I feel I was meant to do. So yeah, it's actually, how did it not change me would be a shorter answer, but it definitely did.
In hindsight, what would you have told the Andrea that wasn't getting pregnant?
I would have told her, first of all, it's normal to grieve. So even if I looked in a crystal ball and I saw, and someone said, you have this amazing daughter, she might take you it might take almost a decade to meet her, but she's amazing. I would have just told myself to grieve when I needed to grieve and believe when I needed to believe, and that they can coexist, and not to put the pressure on myself that I always had to feel one way or the other. That's the sneaky thing I think about grief, that when we have good moments of hope, we might even feel guilty for that, like after a miscarriage, for instance. Or when we are feeling down, we feel bad that I'm not being positive enough, because everyone, when you're struggling to get and stay pregnant, tells you to stay positive. And then you feel guilty. Maybe that's why it's not working. And I just would say, allowing all the feelings, because they're all normal and you're growing a lot through this. You're learning a lot, and it's okay.
In our society, we don't talk a whole lot about grief or infertility for that matter. Do you think the grief part and the guilt, right, but the grief makes infertility so taboo?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I don't think it's grief that makes it taboo, although I do agree that as a society in Western culture anyway, we're uncomfortable with grief. Like, we don't know how to deal with grief. That said, I think the issue with, if I were to generalize, I think the issue with the infertility experience is that other people don't realize how deeply you will grieve while you're struggling. And they'll put on you all these platitudes about how you should be feeling and what you should be doing, what worked for me, what my cousin did, think positively, oh, at least you got pregnant, whatever those things to make you feel better are actually make you feel terrible, because they're not recognizing your grief. And we've published on pregnantish essays all about this, from a cancer survivor who said, well, cancer treatment was really hard. People understood I had a medical issue and they grieved with me. And then when I was going through infertility and grieving, nobody grieved with me. That's where I think the taboo can happen.
With infertility, you can go in with the best of hope, and the outcome may not actually go anywhere. It just fall flat, and you spent tens of thousands of dollars, and there are no guarantees. So I think that people think you can literally buy a baby.
They think you can buy a baby. They think IVF's a one shot to success, but also they think it's not a life or death scenario. And what I always say, like, it's not that big a deal. Like, try again. And it literally is a life scenario. It's not life or death. You're not going to die if you don't have a baby. I mean, that's true. But there is no, I would argue, and I've covered, as you know, in my career, relationships my entire career. There is nothing more important as a value for people than relationships, than family. You look at these high stakes things, the highest value in the world. Of course, you're going to be sad when you're not reaching that. It's your highest value, the highest stakes, the most money you've spent, the most you've maybe put your body through, your bank account through, your emotions through. You're not just going to bounce back when it doesn't work. You're going to grieve. And like, that's just normal.
Right. And what then if it does work and then you miscarry, or, you know, that loss is so profound. And I think as a society, going back to the grief and loss, people think, oh, you're just going to pick up and you're going to move on. And it's, people want to decide for you how you are supposed to feel and how you are supposed to move forward. And that is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't there, and I feel like you can share this with me, there was some study that equated infertility treatment to the same level of anxiety and depression that someone with cancer
or heart disease
go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's absolutely true, because I know we'll probably talk about the work we're doing to try to illuminate these things to providers as well. Most of them know this, but because they're in this field. But sometimes people don't realize the stress, anxiety, and depression that can come along with this diagnosis and this journey. Journey is such a euphemism. It's a journey. Journey sounds like there's happy music and we're skipping along towards the rainbow. But it is. It's a very high stress, because high stakes equal high stress. So it's not surprising when we actually step back and think about why that might be. Most of us, when I went through my first miscarriage, I remember sharing that I wasn't just grieving for what happened, which I was very much grieving for what happened, but there was a whole future I had dreamt up when I was pregnant that was taken away from me. And I wrote an essay. My friend has a platform called Modern Loss, all about grief. And I wrote an essay called Unmet Love. And I really believe those of us cycling through this experience love people we haven't met yet. And that's another hard thing for people to understand. And I have covered love for my whole career as an author. And I believe strongly you can love ancestors from the past you've never met that helped your family get to where they are. You can love babies you've never met, embryos that were never babies. All of these things can take on a form of deep love, because what is love? It's connecting in the most intimate, vulnerable way. And parts of you emerge that you don't know or haven't seen. And I loved who I was when I was pregnant before I miscarried. I loved feeling motherly for this being growing inside of me. And I had never experienced anything like that. And so I think it's a form of love. Unless you've been through it, and a lot of people have been through it. That's the other misconception about all of this, with miscarriage, especially 1 in 4. And that's what's reported. You may not understand that.
Let's talk about how you loved who you were before. So you loved who you were while you were pregnant. Who were you before you were pregnant, and that life before you really came to know infertility?
I was, and I still think I am, but for brief moments in my experience, I was not. A very free spirit, lover of life and experiences. I was commitment phobic. I wrote a book called He's Just Not Your Type, and That's a Good Thing, based on the fact that actually nobody was my type, because I didn't even know if I wanted to get married. My husband was not my type. He's my friend, my hilarious friend, but like not interested. And I think what surprised me about being pregnant was the commitment. I mean, obviously I got married and I did make a formal commitment to Michael, my husband. But if you asked me years before, like how I'd be a mom, I didn't think I'd be as present as I felt being pregnant. So present. Like, how awesome is this? This little being and I are like in this together. And I was making different choices for what I put in my body. I love junk food. Like, I was just I had a commitment to this person that I didn't know, that I didn't naturally have to people. So yeah, it changed me that way. But who am I? Like, I'm still a lover of life and experiences, and I love people. I just didn't think I'd want to be doing less fun things with, whether it's with a baby in my belly or a baby in real, on Earthside. I didn't think I'd be as joyful to be held back from other experiences to take care of those things. And actually, that's also who I am. I want to be a mom. I wanted to be a mom. So it was crystallized for me when I was pregnant. And it felt so good because it felt like, hey, I'm not at such a commitment phobia. Like, I thought I've been called runaway bride by every guy I dated. I can do this. This is me also. And then it was taken away, and more than once. But that actually was a strange. I will never tell someone a miscarriage makes sense or it's a blessing. But for me, I can tell you now, looking back, it was a strange blessing because it really deeply crystallized my commitment to having a baby, however that came into my life. And I don't think, had I not gone through those moments, maybe I wouldn't have fought as hard for it.
Do you think that part of the reason that you went the surrogacy route was because you were so committed and you were ready?
I wasn't. So surrogacy is very complicated. I'll summarize my 8 years to baby in not 8 seconds, but maybe a minute. So I, in year 5 or 6 of everything, and Nathalie, when you can't get pregnant easily, I always say I went around the world and back. Ayurvedic, acupuncture, literally every country that had something they offered for fertility, sign me up. Because something's going to work. When IUI didn't work, it's going to be IVF. When IVF didn't work, and it just kept going like that. And I launched pregnantish, which I know we'll talk about in the middle of the WTF. Why is this happening? Nothing is working. And it was the greatest blessing for me because when we launched, and there wasn't anything like this, this. When we launched, people were not talking like they are now about fertility, infertility. And it was the greatest thing because people started sharing their stories. We were telling powerful stories about the lengths people go to create families. And suddenly this world opened up to me in year 5 when I launched pregnantish, that it may not be my egg, it may not be my body, it may not be my genetics. Like, I don't know how I'm going to have a baby, but I'm going to have a baby. Because everybody I interviewed for pregnantish, not a single one that didn't have a baby the way they thought, which often meant sex. I thought I'd have sex and have a baby.
Isn't that the way it's supposed to work?
Well, right? if you're a heterosexual relationship, yes.
Right. That's what we all are.
Yes. But when sex does not make baby, most of us have paths we never expected. And so every single person I interviewed for pregnantish kept saying, look, it's not what I expected, and I don't regret any of it. Like, where I landed is exactly where I was meant to be. The baby I have is cool. And a lot of them didn't use their genetics, their body, and all these things. Now, I didn't know in year 5 if it was sperm, egg, because there are 3 ingredients to make a baby, right? Good sperm, good egg, good uterus, good uterine environment. So my husband, of course, had A+++ sperm. All the testing was like, oh, it goes over way higher than we want. Probably wanting to high five everyone, but also felt guilty because it was like, oh, it's my shitty body at this point. But I knew I had this diagnosis as a teen of endo. So what I didn't know is, I also knew in year one, I had massive fibroids. So I had a myomectomy to surgically remove. I had open stomach surgery. Thought that would work. But the endo and the fibroids and everything else, I probably didn't have a great uterus. But we didn't know how my eggs were. And I was still like, looking like I was producing good embryos because doctors it really both comforted me and bothered me that doctors would say, you make beautiful embryos. Beautiful. Like, great. But my uterus was always, when they were doing ultrasounds, and we can't find this and we can't find that. So without genetic testing, though, we couldn't prove it. And this is the year you lose track, as you know. I started trying-ish in 2010, 2011. By 2015, I think 2016, we started genetically testing.
When did genetic testing come on the scene?
Well, it was within those 10 years. I don't know exactly, but it was recent-ish that you still can't genetically test eggs, but you can test embryos. And that technology was improving through the years of me cycling and probably you cycling. So, but I remember in year 3 of trying IVF, when it was on the scene, I asked the doctor, not to be named, should we test the embryos? And he said, save your money, go to Hawaii. And my only regret in the journey is how long I stayed with this doctor, because I think his intentions were good. He was like, listen, if it's not healthy, you'll miscarry it. If it is healthy, but that's not an answer, because miscarrying is devastating. So like, anything to save me from that heartache would have been helpful. Even if we had no healthy embryos, I'd rather not miscarry the unhealthy embryo. So I had a miscarriage with him. And then a new doctor, because I changed clinics, which we'll also talk about, a new doctor said to me, you do have beautiful looking embryos. We have to genetically test them to see for sure that it's your uterus, your body, and not your egg, and not the sperm. And once we had healthy embryos, my doctor in year 5 or 6 said, I think you need a surrogate. And it was both devastating and a relief in one moment. Like, I was so depleted, but I was actually relieved. When you have things that are not explained, it's very helpful to have an answer, right? So I was relieved, but it was also like mourning that I'd never carry a pregnancy was really hard. So I have to tell you, when I arrived at surrogacy, that was a many-year story, probably in many minutes, but it was such a journey. 2 surrogates dropped out on us. We couldn't afford it. I'm married to a public school teacher. I had a startup. Pregnantish was an unfunded startup. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't have a surrogate. And then my first cousin saved the day because, and you should know, my surrogate who dropped out on us, I won't name her, but I kind of like fell too hard in the dating way with her because I was sending her flowers. I was sending her daughter gifts. I was so grateful that she was doing this for us. And then she ghosted me. She left me at the altar right before our transfer and right before the paperwork was signed. And it was a 5-month process of legal negotiation. She wanted yoga. She wanted nutritional whatever. I said yes to everything. You're the best. You're the best. And then I still to this day don't know what happened to her. So that was a miscarriage in a way, because it was the home for my baby was ripped away overnight, and I was out thousands of dollars. And it was like, I could not believe in year 5 or 6, this is what now I was facing. And my cousin said, I cannot watch you go through anything more. And I didn't expect to offer, but here I am. Like, and the text that came through, and I know Nathalie, you've seen this text, it said, I said, I can't get out of bed. I'm just so sad. And she said, have you ever thought of a family member to help you? And I was literally holding the phone shaking. And it was so weird. It was like, I knew that was exactly what was going to work. I trusted her with everything. She was one of those people who felt like she sneezed and got pregnant, because she always wanted a baby. Like, her work schedule was such that being off in December, January was helpful. And she She like would schedule. She had these summer babies because she was also off in the summer.
Oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. Like, who gets
can you
to
imagine?
do that? No,
Some people actually
these unicorns.
These unicorns sometimes, yeah. Like my friend Anna is a Pisces because her parents wanted her to be a Pisces. They're hippies.
Wow.
But like, why I say that is that's hilariously like scary for those of us in the infertility world to even comprehend how some people get that. But they have other shitty things happen to them. That's one thing I've realized. Like, this is my crazy thing, but someone else has a crazy thing that came naturally to me or happened for me.
Everybody's got their something. No matter what it is, everybody's got their something. You know, and wow, we are all over. There's one question I have to ask you. I remember there's a story. There's a really beautiful sort of energetic, bigger picture connection story to your cousin and the surrogacy path. Is that something you're comfortable sharing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, thank you for asking. My dad was born in hiding during the Holocaust in Hungary. And my dad escaped Hungary during the communist uprising in 1956 with his younger brother, 10 years younger, on his back. And my cousin Alana is the daughter of my uncle Johnny, who is my dad's brother, who my dad literally escaped Hungary with on his back. Now, my grandmother had a lot of baby trauma. She was, delivered my dad underground and lost babies during the war. And she just had a lot of sadness for good reason over babies. And when my cousin offered to carry, she said to me, she's named after our grandmother. And she said, one thing she said that I'll never forget is, let me try to help rebuild our family, because our dad lost so much family in the Holocaust. And our grandfather survived the camp. Thankfully, my dad and his mom were reunited with my grandfather. But my grandfather's parents were killed. Like, so many people were killed. And my cousin Alana said, I feel like I can help rebuild the family. Where it gets kind of bigger energetically is I had done a reading as I went around the world and back.
One tries everything.
You try everything.
Yes.
I did an energy reading, and half my brain thought, this is insane. Like, what am I doing? And the other half of me totally believed it. So I was really unsure, but I was open to it. She hypnotized me, and in the reading, my grandmother came forward, and this was right before the egg retrieval that is now my daughter. And this was in year 5 or 6. She said, your grandmother's here and she has a message for you. And she's hiding in the shadows. She's hiding in the dark. My grandmother, when I was 4, committed suicide. She had so much trauma. And this energy reader said to me, bring her to the light. She has a message for you. And the message was, and keep in mind, Nathalie, this was a year or 2 before my cousin offered. The message was, you have possibility. I didn't. There's a lot in front of you, and this is like, you're going to be fine. This is it. This is it. This week is it. And so I went into my egg retrieval with my grandmother in my head. And then when my cousin offered and said, I didn't expect to offer, but I was kind of pulled to offer. And she's named after our grandmother. And I can help complete our family. It just became a full circle. And I remember saying to her, my dad carried your dad out of Hungary during the communist uprising. Your dad was on my dad's back, and now you have my back. And this is amazing. And Ariel was frozen in time until my cousin offered. And you should know a lot of weird things have happened since, but that would be a whole other podcast, because the attending nurse was named our grandmother's name. Like, there were so many weird things happening around the name Ariel and the name Judith, my grandmother. And Ariel was the one who checked me into the hotel that night. So many weird patterns. Then on my podcast, the Pregnantish podcast, on the Pregnantish podcast, I interview people with incredible paths to parenthood. And you probably know in the community, there's someone named Ariel.
I do.
I'm Canadian. She lives in Canada. She had posted that she's working with an international gay couple to be their egg donor. I was like, this is amazing. You've never gone through infertility. You're a surrogate, an egg donor, a therapist. I need to have you on my podcast. Why are you dedicating your life to infertility? Booked her for the podcast. That week, this is a true, I know it sounds insane. My mom calls me. Great story. Your cousin Peter, that's my dad's name, your cousin in Hungary, Peter and his husband, have flown into Canada for the first time since your wedding. They're working with an egg donor named Ariel here. And I was like, wait a minute. Well, my cousin Peter is my grandmother's cousin in Hungary. The statistical odds of having an egg donor in Canada when you're in Hungary and it being my cousin, that's my grandmother, and everyone has the same names. My dad is Peter, my daughter's Ariel. It just starts getting really weird. So take it for what it is. Some people might just think it's an amazing coincidence, but it keeps unfolding to me through these years because this was recent. So yeah, that's my story. It's crazy.
It's an incredible story.
Thank you.
And yes, the names Ariel and Judith are not super common.
No.
So it's interesting that those names continue to play out. Yeah.
And my cousin is named after her grandmother.
All the signs. I'm fascinated. Okay, let's talk about pivot points. So you have done so many great things with elevating the discussion around infertility and supporting those that come out of the closet about their infertility, for support, for resources, to feel less alone, community, and. What was the moment where you decided you had to come out of the closet?
It was because I was doing media a lot as an author and on-air personality. And I kept being told by producers that infertility was niche and miscarriage was niche and that it was depressing. So I would pitch. I was writing relationship books, and I'd say the greatest, most underserved chapter of modern day relationships is when sex does not make babies. And I need to talk about this. I'm talking about relationship trends. Here's your trend.
Right.
Here's your trend. And I was told no by so many producers that I knew and really liked, good producers on morning shows. And I realized if media is not going to book me for this, I'll become the media to talk about it. And we became the first media platform in this category. And I knew media. I hosted TV shows. I had written books. I knew content. And I said, the content out here is so schlocky. The audience is not only having a high pain point, high stakes, it's generally an educated, thoughtful, smart, person who's being served baby dust message boards. There must be something better. That's fact checked, that's premium, that's professional. And we launched, and I worked with someone at Google to make sure I can make the claim, but we did. There was nothing like us. And we launched as the first platform solely dedicated to people who needed help to build a family. So I made it very clear when we launched Pregnantish, not just heterosexuals. So anyone who wants a baby and sex does not make baby, that includes LGBTQ, that includes singles, non-binary, anyone just who wants to build a family and can't do it the old-fashioned fun way, come to us. We have good stories, good community, good support. That's how we launched. And actually, we did inspire a lot of public people to come out of the infertility closet through these years. I do think, and Nathalie, you were early on the scene too, so I do want to throw you, some light there, because you invited me on Fertilus years before this was even happening everywhere. It feels now it's everywhere, but back in when I launched and when you were asking to interview me, it really wasn't everywhere. And I think we really did change the conversation. I think my form of advocacy was media. I was on every platform as an infertility person imaginable. New York Magazine and Toronto Star and New York Times and TV. I was like, I am infertile anytime.
And those that don't know, I have had many iterations of my life, and they have been predominantly corporate. However, in between those moments, I felt moved to do this undercover blog that I didn't want anybody that I worked with in the corporate sphere to know about. And that was because I was looking for some sort of community and to find others like me, because I thought that I'm an alien. No one else is like this. Everyone else can sneeze and get pregnant. I can't do this. And so I just felt all of this, weird stuff. It's not weird, it's different.
Right.
And I didn't know how to find my people. So I thought, if I start talking about it, and I'm a marketer by trade, so if I talk about it in these little circles, just because I'm doing a blog doesn't mean everyone's going to know about it. When I hit post on that very first email telling people I had a blog, I think, I just sat and stared at my computer screen to see oh gosh, everyone's going to know there's something wrong with me now. Are they going to judge me? Mm-hmm. And now in retrospect, that was all just crazy.
But that's exactly what I went through.
Right? But
very
that's
vulnerable.
I wanted to ask you.
Very vulnerable.
So you were vulnerable too. I feel like you came out guns blazing, I'm infertile. I'm going to tell everybody about it, and I'm going to be the spokesperson. How did you feel? That very first time that you said, I'm coming out.
So when I came out, it was first on Facebook. But it's a great question, because my husband was like, press, publish. I was shaking. So I did this very throw up on my computer screen post, which was blah, here's me being vulnerable. Well, you've seen me on book tours, what I've really been going through, and I told all my friends. I've had fertility shots in my purse, what you haven't known behind the scenes. My drawers look like I'm a junkie. I'm doing so many drugs, literally in train station, in alleyways. What you haven't known
is that even though my body's been bruised, my heart's been so bruised, more bruised. And what you haven't known is that I'm really suffering, and I'm not sharing this just to overshare. I'm sharing it because I've created something I've craved. And I know a lot of you silently consuming this are going through it too, and you are not alone. And my last line of that post was, so don't judge a Facebook by its cover. And I like puns, clearly. So I pressed publish, and I was shaking, and my husband was like, you did it. And I was crying, and I got inundated. I'm sure the same with you. I got inundated with messages, and a few people said, please, please, please make this public. I need to share it. Well, I'm launching a platform called pregnantish. I can't stay silent about it, but we weren't ready to launch. It was January 2017. We were to launch in April. I didn't have enough articles. I'm like, I can't launch yet. No, just press. So I pressed publish. I went to bed, and I woke up to 5 media requests. And New York Magazine and all these places said, can we interview you about this wacky platform dedicated to infertility? That's how weird it was at that time.
Isn't it amazing how far the industry has come? In fact, what blows your mind looking back to where we are today?
Yeah. What blows my mind is how it's everywhere. It's everywhere and it's nowhere at the same time, because there's still so much work to be needed. But it blows my mind that in these 6 short years since I made that Facebook post, it's celebrities. I do think we had a small role in normalizing this conversation. Obviously, Resolve's been around. Resolve is the National Infertility Association. They do great work. They've been around for over 40 years with true advocacy, and that's so important. But I mean, the way I spoke in media everywhere about my infertility, a lot of public people said, you've inspired me to do the same. And then, it's like a funny thing. We have so many reality stars and sports anchors and all these people in our audience at Pregnantish, because they would tell their friends. So Sarah Walsh, who's a Fox anchor told her friend Nicole Briscoe at ESPN. Like it ended up just spreading through these celebrities telling other celebrities. So it's been really cool to see it everywhere.
And it's a huge sense of relief, really. Like, I can speak from experience with you of being able to just say, I have gone through this, I'm going through this, and it sucks. And being able to just get it off your chest is so therapeutic.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that this was amazing, especially for people who are so public that felt like they were hiding, right? Living a double life.
Totally.
Like you were too.
Yeah, 100%.
Question for you. So we're talking a little bit about pregnantish, and pregnantish has really bridged the gap, not only between the conversation and the community and people, but you're also bridging the gap between patients and providers. I know you've been doing a lot of work in this space. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about what you've been doing and what you plan to do?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for asking that, because it's something I'm so passionate about. So I started through pregnantish. People were asking me constantly for clinic recommendations. I personally hopped around so many times to doctors. You probably did too, right? So it was like, to me, that's problematic that we're spending so much time and money and you're not being served the way you need to be served during a very high stakes, vulnerable time, high money. But it's not always the provider's fault. Like, that's the thing I started to realize too. The providers not only sometimes weren't seeing us as human because they were so busy and overloaded, we weren't seeing them as human. It's like Dr. So-and-so in a white lab coat, like, we sometimes didn't realize how much they care. Like, they went into this because they want us to have healthy babies. And it started to feel like it was an us and them. And doctors were writing to us. We're really frustrated with like how many people aren't seeing it through. IVF doesn't often work the first time. Like, can you help with the education to patients about the process? And I was just like, wow. This is an issue for patients and providers. We're actually on the same team. I've written relationship advice my whole career. It never takes one to make a baby. It doesn't take one to make a baby in art. Like in reproductive technology, we need more than one. So why don't we come together in this kind of what I think of like almost like marriage therapy to bring patients and providers together to work better together? I need to educate both sides. It can't be one side. I want to teach patients to better advocate for themselves and stick with something, but in a way that feels aligned with their values, their needs, all of that. And I want to teach providers, and providers are just doctors. It's every part of the care continuum. So billing, nurses, they're all burnt out. But like sometimes not everyone is patient as you have questions so just training them a little to understand it's not personal if someone has a million questions. Like, that's actually a good sign that she cares so much or they care so much. Like, that's great. So we're really trying to, and the exciting thing about it is I know that doctors love data. So we sourced the largest study on patient retention a couple of years ago called Why I Left My Fertility Clinic. And I spoke about it at ASRM, the American Reproductive, I was part of a great panel that my friend put together there. Then I was invited with a poster presentation at ESHRE, which is the European conference. We got an encore, and I did that in partnership with Merck Global, an encore presentation at the UK conference in January in Belfast. I'm now speaking at the New England Fertility Society. Why I share all this isn't like just to puff my chest. It's that gosh, this is so needed, right? Like the fact that I keep getting invited to share the research, because I published a 50-page guidelines report. I was published with the research in the journal Human Reproduction. So now it blows my mind, but I'm scientifically published, which helps doctors realize that may not have been like, who's this blogger? Which I hate. No offense to blogs. Some blogs are great. I'm not a blogger. I've been my entire life a professional journalist, and I bring that same investigation to this, right?
Right.
So I am very excited by it, and we've launched out of this a market research division that's kick-ass called Pregnantish Insights, where we're going to be soon, and I don't even think I've told you, Nathalie, launching another nationwide study on bridging the patient-provider gap. And my whole goal is to bring us together to the table to make that healthy baby, and with love, not with us and them.
Amazing, because everybody comes into it with so much emotion. I mean, how could you not? And providers, clinicians and those that work in that space, that's their professional job, right? And they're supposed to be the expert, and they are the experts. But just because they're an expert doesn't mean we're supposed to look at them as our therapists, right? And so everybody has their sort of their thing, and some doctors are amazing at it all, right? They are high IQ and EQ, right? But there are some that are more on the high IQ side too, and that's all wonderful and lovely. I think it's about finding the right person within, and if that's not the actual doctor, finding the person that is going to be patient forward and facing. And a lot of times too, at least in my experience, and the reason that I left was lack of communication.
I actually think as the awareness has exploded, so much money, private equity, has been poured into the fertility industry.
Sure.
And decisions are sometimes made without thinking of the human side of the patient or provider. So a lot of embryologists, nurses, doctors are burnt out. There's like major issues happening as because what are these? Now, I don't want to demonize. There's a lot of great business people making investments and decisions, but sometimes the ones just sniff the money trail and are trying to see more people, more patients, more turnover, more conversion. And if you don't consider communication, human contact, all of that, you may lose out. And that's actually what we're trying to illuminate for the industry. Like it is not the patient journey in this category is not, they're not purchasing a cupcake. Like it takes a lot of time for someone to use an egg donor, for someone to decide on IVF, for someone to afford IVF. Like these things take time. And so your metrics of how things look in the patient journey don't actually match. Because I've seen some of these cases. Don't actually match the experience we go through. So don't scratch your heads if you're not keeping people when you treat them this way. And anyway, I think so many people are doing great work, so this is not to throw providers under the bus or business people. I am grateful business people are investing in this. Thank goodness. We need their help. But understanding the patient experience in a deeper way is going to benefit everyone.
Hugely. I think there's, in the larger picture, a reason why medicine is moving towards concierge style.
100%.
And it's fascinating that you're in it through the research and you have your finger on the pulse of what is actually happening right now. Because I don't have that,
Yeah, and I never thought that would be part of pregnantish, but the popularity of this first study, and I've been an author, like it kind of makes sense that, and a relationship author, so it kind of makes sense to look at it through that lens, could actually, hopefully, if we do our job right, positively improve for everybody, improve this experience. I also, by the way, want to help clinicians get the care they need. Because gosh.
How so?
Well, if you look at the numbers, embryologists and nurses burn out. One thing you have to do when you apply to a scientific conference is show the research over the years that have been done on this similar topic. How yours is different or how yours is similar. I dug into 40 years of research for our submission. The pain point's been there every decade, that patients are burnt out and clinicians are burnt out. What are we going to do about it?
Fascinating.
What we're not going to do about it is if we keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. We have a bucket that's leaking. If we keep filling the bucket, we're not serving the people making the magic in the labs, and we're not serving the patients that are needed to make the baby,
right.
So what are we doing? So that's how I haven't physically undergone fertility treatment since 2018 when my cousin had the embryo transfer. But so then I was in the lab, the clinic a lot. But I do a lot of tours. I meet with a lot of people kind of in the weeds in this. And I feel very privileged that they share off the record, sometimes cry to me, literally doctors. You would never know, Nathalie. I've had doctors cry to me
Wow.
about how burnt out they are. That's problematic.
That's hugely problematic.
Yes. So I want to bring this up on your podcast because I think as a patient advocate, which we both are, so often we don't think about that side. We don't think about what they're managing or dealing with. And if we saw them as more human, also it may help, right? Both sides need to see that.
100%. They got into the business because they
care.
Doctors typically have a different kind of heart than a business person.
Yes.
Different kind of life. But I think it's really beautiful, and this world has evolved and changed in so many ways over the last decade, let alone last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah, so everybody deserves to be taken care of. So what are some resources that you would recommend to those that are facing infertility or are trying to support someone who is?
Aside from pregnantish and fertilist, do you mean? Okay, no, of course.
Well, fertilist is sort of like inactive at the moment.
Okay.
I should say. I'm kind of like, it's the resources are there, but it's still kind of. But thank you for saying
yes,
that.
Yes, of course. Well, pregnantish is not the only great resource out there. So I will mention like one thing that I love that Resolve does is support groups in person. Uniquely Knitted, I think, does it as well. I think anytime you could physically be with your community, that's great. So those are definitely important. I also would suggest infertility focused therapists. I know a lot of great ones. It's one of these things like someone to know those nuances may be helpful. And I just think for people supporting people going through infertility, I would say just you don't have to solve something when someone's grieving. You just need to hold the space in a way that acknowledges what they're feeling. And that's the best thing you can do.
100%. And I am speaking from experience, but also I think in terms of general grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the same applies.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
grief.
same anywhere, right? It's going through something hard. If somebody has tried something, right, and then hears it from someone else, it feels so undermining. I can't tell you how many times somebody would say, "Have you just tried?
Oh yeah.
Just go on vacation. Just relax. Just relax." Was like
it's the worst.
That should be like I don't know. A slogan that
well not only and
uses.
the thing with just relax, not only no, that's the wrong advice,
Yeah,
but
no,
also when you're going through something so stressful, it's the thing you should say is, of course you're stressed, how can I support you? That's much better.
You are so much more than your infertility and your experience with it, right? I mean, the face of infertility. There you are, there you have it.
Yeah.
What is something, and okay, let me rephrase that and start over. You are so much more than your infertility experience, and most of your interviews are infertility centric, relationship infertility centric at this point. So what is something that you wouldn't normally share during an infertility interview about yourself, about your personal self, like that would be so off topic if you talked about it during an infertility interview?
I would say that I'm trying to get back into music composition because I was a very serious piano player growing up, and I competed, and I just love making music, and I actually lost that part of myself. I live in a New York apartment, right? Like we don't have a piano, but my daughter gravitates to music and wants to play piano. So I'm relearning, I'm reconnecting with that part of myself. And I started composing a new song about a week ago. I was in Toronto, my sister has a piano, and it just felt so good. And I think I might just re-engage in that part of my life.
Ooh, do you think this will be like a professional thing?
No, gosh, no.
Just for fun. Just for fun.
No, but we do a lot of video production at Pregnantish Productions. Maybe I'll score one of our videos. I think music is just, music and writing is connected because it's the voice of I'm telling a story in a different way, right? But I have a terrible eye, but I have a pretty good ear for music and for writing. And so that's what I'm gonna How about you? Who are you outside of it?
What am I excited about? I'm excited about this podcast.
I am too. So exciting.
All over again, which has entirely new meaning since my life has sort of pivoted in the last, 6 months or so. So, Andrea, I always want to keep the conversation going as long as I possibly can. I cannot thank you enough for being here, for sharing your voice with me, and for sharing your voice on behalf of so many in the infertility community, and for the great work that you are doing between patients, providers, the community. It's truly brilliant. So thank you again. And
thank you. It was such an honor to be one of your early podcast guests. You're going to be great at this because you're just a compassionate person with also a great voice. So I appreciate being here, and I will continue using my voice. I know you will too, to just support people going through life moments.
Thank you so much.